I want you to close your eyes for just a second. I mean, really picture this. Imagine you're stepping out into the stifling, oppressive, just sickly, yellow-hued streets of 19th century St. Petersburg.
Yeah, that heat.
Right. The air is so heavy, it smells like poverty and quiet desperation. And the sheer heat of the city feels like an actual physical weight pressing down on your chest.
Suffocating.
Completely suffocating. But then, in the blink of an eye, you are entirely transported. Suddenly, you're standing under these glittering chandeliers in a frantic, incredibly opulent European casino.
It's a total shift.
Yeah, you're surrounded by the hypnotic, rhythmic spin of green felt roulette tables and the sharp, undeniable clinking of gold coins.
It is such a violent juxtaposition, you know?
Yeah.
We go from the total isolation of this cramped, coffin-like room where a guy's mind is literally eating itself alive, right into the performative, high-stakes chaos of international high society.
Where people are just throwing away their entire futures on the bounce of a little ivory ball. And that geographic and psychological whiplash, that is entirely the point of our journey today. Because our mission for this deep dive is to conduct a rigorous philosophical analysis of the feverish, brilliant, and honestly terrifying mind of the Russian author Fyodor Dostoevsky.
Oh, absolutely terrifying. Brilliant, but terrifying.
Yeah. We are unpacking his profound arguments about human nature, morality, power dynamics, and the psychological consequences of our actions. And we're doing this by exploring two of his absolute masterpieces, The Gambler and Crime and Punishment.
Which is great because Dostoevsky, he wasn't just writing compelling fiction. I mean, he was conducting psychological stress tests on the human soul.
Stress tests, I like that.
Yeah, he puts his characters in these impossible, highly pressurized situations just to see exactly where their moral framework cracks and, well, what spills out when it finally does.
And to do this properly, we're pulling from a huge collection of sources today. We've got fresh translations, audiobooks, and these really incredible deep dive literary analyses that completely dissect the psychological and philosophical underpinnings of his characters.
Yeah, some of the insights from the sources, especially the Arabic analysis on the existential nature of the casino, are just mind-blowing.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with the green felt of the casino in The Gambler, specifically this idea of the roulette table as a kind of existential laboratory.
Oh, for sure.
You immediately meet the protagonist, Alexei Ivanovich. And he is a tutor, caught in this miserable web of debt, deeply and agonizingly in love with a woman who essentially treats him with absolute contempt.
Total contempt.
Right. And on top of all that, he is a massive gambling addict. But the sources point out that if we look at the underlying philosophy of his addiction, this is not just about a guy wanting money to buy nice things.
Oh, no, not at all.
For Alexei, gambling is a profound existential rebellion.
Yeah, if we reduce Alexei's compulsion to just mere greed, we miss the entire philosophical architecture of the whole novel. To really understand the addict in Dostoevsky's world, we have to look at how the roulette table functions for him.
How so?
Well, according to the sources, it acts as a mechanism to forcibly reset the grossly unfair starting conditions of life.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, think about the extreme rigidity of 19th century Europe. Class, wealth, status, these were totally immovable objects. If you were born a poor tutor, you died a poor tutor. The aristocracy held all the power, and upward mobility was practically a myth.
The system was completely locked.
Precisely, locked tight. But the roulette table creates this incredibly potent, intoxicating illusion. It whispers to the player that right before the wheel spins, the universe is suddenly perfectly egalitarian.
Because everyone is at the mercy of the same wheel.
Exactly. Before that ball drops, the wealthy French nobleman and the starving Russian pauper, the brilliant intellectual and the absolute fool, they are rendered entirely equal by the physics of the game.
That is wild to think about.
Right. They possess the exact same statistical probability of hitting their number. It feels like this momentary injection of pure, unadulterated cosmic justice into an otherwise deeply unjust world.
It's like the ultimate democratization of fate.
Yes, beautifully put.
But the tragedy that Dostoevsky maps out so ruthlessly here is that this is a complete mirage. The gambling doesn't actually erase those class differences, does it?
Not even a little bit.
It actually strips away the polite veneer of society and exposes those inequalities with a cruelty that is genuinely hard to stomach. Alexei observes the people around the table obsessively.
He's always watching.
Always. And he ends up dividing them into two distinct philosophical camps. First, you have the gentleman, the aristocratic player who basically treats the casino as a stage.
Oh, the gentleman's game is just a masterclass in performative apathy. Alexei watches these wealthy European elites casually drop heavy gold coins onto the table with this air of complete detachment.
Like it doesn't even matter to them.
Exactly. If they win, they offer this polite, bored little smile. If they lose, they don't even blink. The entire performance is designed to signal that they're entirely above the concept of money.
Which is so arrogant.
It really is. They're trying to show that the allure of gain, which is literally the very foundation of the casino, somehow just doesn't apply to them. They treat the chaotic laws of chance as a quaint diversion arranged exclusively for their amusement.
And Alexei absolutely despises this behavior.
He hates it.
He looks at this aristocratic detachment and identifies it as profoundly hypocritical and fundamentally base. It's an arrogant display of wealth masquerading as polite indifference.
Right, because the gentleman is pretending not to care about the money, which is absurd, because the money is the only reason the institution exists in the first place.
Exactly. That's why Alexei vastly prefers the other group, the mob. The desperate, sweating, frantic masses crowding the outer edges of the tables.
Yeah, the mob trips away all that hypocrisy. Alexei prefers their raw, unbuttoned, honest greed, because it's authentic. The mob isn't pretending.
They can't afford to pretend.
No, they are trembling over a single silver coin because that coin literally dictates survival or ruin for them. And what's fascinating is the almost religious reverence this mob maintains for the game.
Even though the odds are terrible?
Right. Despite knowing the mathematical reality of the bank's edge, the zero on the roulette wheel is the mechanism of their inevitable destruction. It ensures the house ultimately consumes everything.
But they still play.
They do. They approach the table trying to calculate the incalculable tracking patterns on little ruled papers, desperately trying to impose human rationality onto pure, uncaring chaos.
Okay, I have to push back a little on Alexei's romanticization of this rebellion, though.
Okay, go for it.
He frames this as some grand, honest stand against a hypocritical society. But honestly, peeling back the 19th century aesthetics, this looks exactly like the eternal human desire to find a loophole in the system.
Oh, I see where you're going.
Yeah, I look at Alexei's psychology and I see the exact same architecture driving modern-day trading or the obsession with cryptocurrency over the last decade.
That is a really interesting comparison.
Isn't it just the identical desire to bypass the slow, agonizing trudge of normal life and demand that the universe reward us instantaneously? We don't want to work for 40 years to build incremental stability. We want to leverage everything on a digital coin and be millionaires by next Tuesday.
Yeah, that's spot on. The medium shifts from the roulette wheel to the glowing exchange screen. But the psychological refusal to accept the mundane reality of labor is totally identical.
It's human nature.
It is. Alexei explicitly rejects the idea that his personality, his very existence, should be slowly sacrificed to the accumulation of capital over a lifetime. He demands the payout immediately as a way of asserting his own existence in the present tense.
He wants to matter now.
Exactly. He is trying to force the universe to acknowledge him right now on his own terms.
And that rejection of the slow build of capital scales up beautifully into the broader social critique Dostoevsky is weaving here.
It really does.
The microcosm of the casino table expands into the macrocosm of European society. The fictional setting of Roulettenberg becomes a battleground for a massive philosophical clash of national characters.
Right, because Roulettenberg is this international hub.
Yeah, and Alexei acts as a relentless critic of the French, the Germans, the Russians, and the English. He just totally dissects their fundamental worldviews based on the sources we reviewed.
Dostoevsky uses these national typologies to conduct a really deep philosophical inquiry into the values of Western Europe versus the chaotic soul of Russia.
Let's talk about the Germans first.
Okay, yeah. If we look at his critique of the German system, Alexei views it not as an idyllic model of hard work, but as a terrifying, soul-crushing capitalist machine.
Yeah. He describes walking through the countryside, observing the idealized German family. You have the Vater, the father figure, presiding over a picturesque home, operating on a system of grueling rectitude.
Reading moral books under a linden tree, right?
Exactly. But Alexei cuts right through that postcard imagery. He argues that philosophically, this structure is a system of generational slavery.
Generational slavery, that's a heavy term.
It is. But it fits.
It does. It's an economy built on the willing sacrifice of the individual for the perpetuation of capital. The German family works like oxen, amassing wealth incrementally, generation by generation.
But there's a huge cost.
A massive cost. The mechanism of this accumulation requires sacrificing the youth. The father might funnel the younger son into the military or deny the daughter a dowry.
Condemning her to spinsterhood.
Right, entirely to consolidate the inheritance for the eldest son. And the true horror, from Alexei's perspective, is that the victims are culturally conditioned to view their own subjugation as honorable.
They accept it.
They do. They willingly feed themselves into the machine of the family's capital.
And Alexei points out that it takes 5 generations of this relentless, joyless labor just to produce one wealthy Rothschild.
5 generations of suffering.
Yeah, and he categorically rejects this entire paradigm. He declares he would rather squander his money or grow fat the Russian way than become a subservient cog in a multi-generational financial machine. He absolutely refuses to trade his present soul for future capital.
Then Dostoevsky contrasts this with the French philosophy, which is primarily represented by the character of the Marquis de Gruyère.
Oh, the Marquis.
Yeah. The French, according to Alexei, possess an immaculate form. It's this inherited nobility of manners. They know exactly how to behave, how to navigate polite society, how to deploy perfect etiquette.
But Alexei sees right through that too, doesn't he?
Oh, absolutely. Philosophically, Alexei diagnoses this form as entirely hollow.
The form is just a defensive facade. Alexei notes this staggering hypocrisy. A Frenchman will tolerate a profound, foundational insult to his actual moral character without batting an eye. But he will instigate a duel to the death over a minor technical breach of etiquette, like a tweak of the nose.
It's all about appearances.
Entirely. The appearance of honor has completely superseded actual moral integrity. The manners are exquisite, but there is no original soul beneath them.
Which brings us to the Russian chaos.
All right, Gal.
The Russians lack the rigid generational discipline of the Germans and the polished, hollow form of the French. Alexei argues they are immensely gifted, deeply feeling, but fundamentally undisciplined.
They're a mess.
A total mess. Because they lack this European form, they appear undignified in polite society. But more importantly, the Russian philosophy is entirely incompatible with the slow acquisition of capital.
They want it all right now.
Exactly. They want everything at once. This is why the roulette table is so fatally attractive to the Russian mind in Dostoevsky's universe. It offers the promise of instantaneous wealth without the soul-destroying degradation of generational labor.
And observing all of this is the English character, Mr. Astley.
Ah, Mr. Astley.
He's this shy, vastly wealthy sugar heir who is silently observant and fundamentally decent. Unlike the Marquis who performs his emotions, Astley feels deeply but remains stoic.
He's a really interesting contrast.
He is. He actually loves the same woman Alexei loves, but does so with a quiet, agonizing modesty. He's the grounded, moral counterpoint to the superficiality of the French and the self-destruction of the Russians.
So Dostoevsky is framing a terrible existential ultimatum here. He is forcing us to ask, what is inherently more valuable?
Right.
The chaotic, deeply authentic, but entirely self-destructive soul of the Russian? Or the perfectly ordered, mathematically precise, but profoundly soulless machine of Western capitalism and etiquette?
It's a bleak choice.
Very. The suggestion is that the functionality and wealth of the Western model inherently demand the death of the authentic human spirit.
Wow. And that philosophical clash dictates everything, trickling down from international economics right into the most intimate human relationships.
It really does.
We see this manifested in the deeply disturbing master-slave dynamic between Alexei and Polina. I mean, this is not a romance. It is a psychological hostage situation.
It's incredibly toxic. It is a forensic examination of power, submission, and the desire to abdicate the burden of freedom.
Let's get into that.
Well, Alexei's love for Polina is inextricably linked to his own degradation. He obsessively reinforces that he is her willing slave.
He literally calls himself her slave.
Constantly. He confesses that he frequently detests her so deeply he wants to plunge a knife into her chest. And yet, simultaneously, if she ordered him to throw himself off a mountain, he would leap into the abyss with profound pleasure.
That is just so unhinged. And Polina doesn't shy away from this dynamic at all. She completely weaponizes it.
Oh, she loves it.
There is this deeply uncomfortable scene in the park where she decides to test the absolute limits of her control. They're sitting there and she points out a pompous German baron and baroness.
The walking embodiments of that rigid European order we were just talking about.
Exactly. And for no reason other than her own amusement, Polina orders Alexei to go up and insult them.
Just out of nowhere.
Yep. And Alexei obeys, fully aware that this unprovoked aggression will cause a massive scandal. It could potentially ruin his own standing and bring total disaster upon Polina's family.
But he does it anyway.
He does. He approaches the Baroness in her huge gray silk dress, bows deeply and loudly declares himself her slave.
Oh, man.
And when the Baron yells, "What?" Alexei just mimics and mocks him, shouting "Javo" at the top of his lungs until the Baron actually raises his cane to strike him.
It's a deliberate, absurd act of self-humiliation.
It really is.
But analyzing the mechanisms here, this isn't just about Alexei's masochism. It's about Polina's complete lack of agency in her own life. What's fascinating here is the underlying philosophy of power at play.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Well, look at the structural power surrounding Polina. Her stepfather, the general, is on the brink of financial collapse.
Right.
The slick Marquis de Grey holds all the general's debts, essentially owning the family outright. So Polina is trapped. She's a pawn in the machinations of the Marquis and the foolishness of the general.
She has no way out.
None. Because she is systemically oppressed by the financial realities of her situation, she exerts tyrannical, sadistic control over the one person beneath her in the hierarchy.
Which is Alexei. It's the physics of oppression trickling down.
Exactly.
She has no power over her fate, so she borrows power by annihilating Alexei's dignity. And Alexei accepts the degradation because, well, in the chaotic void of his existence, total submission to her whims gives his life a definitive, unquestionable shape.
It's sick, but it makes sense within their twisted logic. But Dostoevsky doesn't let this deterministic hierarchy stand.
Thank goodness.
Right, just as the Marquis, the general, and Polina have settled into this calculated power structure, all of them just waiting for the general's 75-year-old paralyzed grandmother to die in Moscow so the inheritance can clear the debts, the ultimate disruption occurs.
Babushka arrives. Antonida Vasilyevna.
The best entrance in literature.
It really is. They are sending these frantic telegrams asking if she's dead yet, and instead she is carried up the hotel stairs by a small army of servants. She is alive, incredibly loud, and immediately calling out the hypocrisy of everyone in the room.
She just reads them all for filth.
She does. But her arrival isn't just a fun plot twist. According to the sources, philosophically, the grandmother is the embodiment of pure, unadulterated fate crashing into the fragile, deterministic architecture of European calculation.
That's a great way to put it. The general and the Marquis have built their entire future on a logical, mathematical assumption. Old, sick women die, wealth transfers, debts are settled.
It makes sense on paper.
It is a totally rational projection. But the grandmother shatters this rationality. Not only does she refuse to die, but she immediately demands to be taken to the roulette tables.
Which is just the wildest move.
It is. She represents the terrifying unpredictability of the Russian soul intersecting with the mechanics of chance.
She doesn't care about the odds at all. She demands her servants place these heavy gold coins on the zero, completely ignoring every statistical warning from the croupiers.
And the terrifying part is, at first, she wins.
She does win, but then the chaos consumes her. Over the next few days, she's swallowed whole by the addiction, and she gambles away the entire vast fortune that the general was relying on to survive.
Her gambling spree is the total annihilation of the European order. The rational plans just evaporate.
Gone.
The Marquis flees. The general's impending marriage to the manipulative Mademoiselle Blanche falls completely apart. The grandmother's descent into the chaos of the roulette wheel proves that no matter how much form you possess, no matter how carefully you calculate your capital, the unpredictable spin of fate can and will consume it all.
And that desire to assert existence immediately, to test fate and force the universe's hand, it doesn't just apply to money on a green felt table.
No, Dostoevsky takes this much further.
He does. If Alexei Ivanovich is testing his fate against the mathematical laws of the casino, Dostoevsky scales this exact psychological mechanism up in Crime and Punishment.
Oh, massively.
He takes the protagonist, Rodion Raskolnikov, and has him test his fate against the moral laws of the universe itself.
It's the same underlying rebellion, but with infinitely higher stakes. We're talking life and death now.
Exactly. So we transition to Crime and Punishment. We meet Raskolnikov, who is this brilliant, destitute, former university student living in just horrific squalor in St. Petersburg.
So grim.
And he murders an old, vicious pawnbroker with an axe. But the crucial philosophical distinction we must make, based on the Arabic source's explicit highlighting, is that the murder is not a robbery gone wrong.
Right. That's a common misconception.
It is a deeply premeditated philosophical experiment.
Yeah, Raskolnikov has actually authored a manifesto outlining his belief that humanity is fractured into two rigid categories.
Okay, let's break this down.
First, you have the ordinary. This is the vast, overwhelming majority of the human race. Their function is strictly reproductive and conservative. They exist to obey the law, maintain the status quo, and just keep society functioning.
They're just the cogs in the machine.
Exactly. They are the raw material of history. But then you have the second category, the extraordinary.
And who are they?
This is a microscopic fraction of humanity. Individuals like Napoleon who bring entirely new paradigms, laws, and structures into the world. Raskolnikov theorizes that these extraordinary beings possess an inherent inner right to step over the moral boundaries that constrain the ordinary masses.
Meaning, they have the moral authorization to commit violence.
Yes. If an obstacle stands in the way of an extraordinary man's grand vision, he is not just permitted, but morally obligated to eliminate it.
That is wild.
The laws of ordinary morality are viewed as trivial constraints for those destined to push humanity forward. For them, shedding blood isn't a crime. It is an executive action.
Here's where it gets really interesting, but also terrifying.
Yeah.
I look at Raskolnikov's theory, and it is horrifying. But it's also incredibly familiar. I have to look at this starving, isolated student who has dropped out of school, whose life is objectively a failure, and ask, isn't this entire philosophy just a colossal narcissistic defense mechanism?
Oh, 100%.
It's a way for a powerless man to convince himself he's actually a dormant god. And if we look around today, this exact psychology is everywhere.
Everywhere.
Think of the modern tech founder whose vision for the future somehow justifies exploiting their workforce or bypassing safety regulations.
Right.
Or politicians whose righteous cause supposedly exempts them from basic legal constraints. It is the deep-seated belief that one's personal genius renders the boring rules of human decency entirely obsolete.
It is the ultimate rationalization of the ego. But we also have to place Raskolnikov in his specific historical context to fully grasp what Dostoevsky is doing here.
Okay, set the scene for us.
Dostoevsky is directly taking aim at the rising tide of utilitarianism in 19th century Europe.
Utilitarianism, right.
Yeah, utilitarianism basically proposed that moral actions are simply those that maximize utility or happiness for the majority. It turned morality into a rational calculus, a math problem.
And Raskolnikov takes this to the extreme.
He takes this philosophy to its cold, monstrous extreme. Look at the variables. The pawnbroker is a cruel, miserable parasite on society. Raskolnikov is young, brilliant, and could use her hoarded wealth to finish his education and become a great benefactor to humanity.
So the math checks out for him.
Exactly. The utilitarian arithmetic heavily favors the murder.
But the arithmetic entirely ignores the architecture of the human soul.
Precisely.
Raskolnikov conducts his experiment. He brings down the axe. He murders the pawnbroker. And in a tragic twist of fate, he is forced to murder her innocent sister, Lizaveta, who just stumbles into the apartment.
Just brutal collateral damage.
And he commits the act to answer one agonizing question burning in his mind. Am I a trembling creature, or do I have the right?
And the answer is delivered instantly.
Not through the courts, though.
No, not through the legal system. It's delivered through the immediate shattering of his own psyche. This is where Dostoevsky completely revolutionizes the concept of consequence.
How so?
Well, the physical punishment, the trial, the 8 years in the Siberian labor camp, that's all barely a footnote in the novel. The true, devastating punishment is enacted the very millisecond the crime is committed.
Right. The title is Crime and Punishment, but the sources make it clear that the real punishment is psychological.
It's an ontological severing. Dostoevsky uses this profound, terrifying metaphor of the scissors.
The scissors, I love this part.
After the murder, Raskolnikov feels as though an invisible pair of scissors has violently snipped his connection to the rest of the human race. He hasn't just killed 2 women. He has severed his own soul from the fabric of humanity.
That is just such a haunting image.
And the anatomy of that severing is true hell. Raskolnikov believed his intellect would elevate him above humanity, turning him into a Superman. Instead, the act of taking a life exiles him entirely outside of humanity.
The isolation is absolute.
Total. When his mother and sister arrive in the city to see him, their pure, unadulterated love feels like physical agony to him. He cannot endure their presence because he knows an impassable chasm now lies between his blood-stained hands and their innocence.
And the physical geography of the novel actively participates in this psychological torture. Dostoevsky's St. Petersburg is not a romantic imperial capital.
Not at all.
It is a claustrophobic, foul-smelling, suffocating nightmare. It's the height of summer, the air is thick with dust and the stench of taverns, and everything is painted in these sickly, oppressive yellow hues.
The yellow is everywhere.
It is. The environment itself becomes an accomplice to his mental breakdown.
The city is the external manifestation of his diseased, feverish conscience. He lives in a tiny, cramped, rented room that the text explicitly and repeatedly compares to a coffin or a closet.
He's buried alive.
He has buried himself alive in his own intellectual arrogance. The suffocating heat of the streets mirrors the inescapable, crushing weight of his isolation.
And into this psychological pressure cooker steps Porfiry Petrovich.
Oh, Porfiry is the best.
The investigator assigned to the murder. Porfiry is fascinating because he doesn't operate like a conventional detective.
Right, he's not looking for clues in the traditional sense.
He isn't out there dusting for fingerprints or matching blood splatters. He intuitively knows Raskolnikov is the killer almost from the start, but he lacks concrete evidence. So he launches an entirely psychological offensive.
Because Porfiry recognizes that the real crime scene is not the pawnbroker's apartment. It is the chaotic interior of Raskolnikov's mind.
Oh, I like that. The crime scene is his mind.
Exactly. Because Raskolnikov is an intellectual, a man deeply tortured by his own ideological constructs, Porfiry attacks him on the level of philosophy. He engages him in a terrifying game of intellectual cat and mouse.
Porfiry actually brings up Raskolnikov's own published article about the extraordinary man during a casual conversation.
Such a brilliant move.
It's so calculated. He casually probes the edges of Raskolnikov's sanity, letting him know very subtly that he understands the exact philosophical machinery behind the crime.
But Porfiry doesn't make an immediate arrest.
Why doesn't he?
Because he understands human nature better than Raskolnikov does. He knows that the isolation, the agony of those snip scissors will eventually become heavier than any physical prison.
He's letting him stew in it.
Yeah, Porfiry essentially initiates a psychological siege, waiting for the fortress of Raskolnikov's ego to collapse. He knows that human nature will eventually compel Raskolnikov to confess, not out of a desire to be locked in a cell, but out of a desperate, overwhelming biological and spiritual need to rejoin the human family.
To heal the snip.
Exactly, to heal that severing.
Raskolnikov's intellect broke the moral law, but his human conscience simply couldn't sustain the weight of the experiment. He confesses, and he is shipped off to Siberia.
But the philosophical journey doesn't end with a neat, tidy redemption.
No, it doesn't. Dostoevsky leaves us with a final vision that is shockingly prophetic, stretching far beyond a 19th century novel and pointing a finger directly at the modern listener.
It is one of the most chilling conclusions in literature.
Set it up for us.
While Raskolnikov is lying in a prison hospital bed in Siberia, recovering from an illness, he experiences a fever dream. And this dream serves as Dostoevsky's final apocalyptic warning.
According to the Arabic source, this dream is heavily emphasized as the crux of the novel's warning.
Yes. In this dream, a strange new plague emerges from the depths of Asia and sweeps across Europe. But this isn't a biological pathogen like cholera.
It's worse.
It is a virus of ideas. When a person becomes infected by this plague, they don't develop a physical fever. Instead, they become absolutely unshakably convinced that they, and they alone, possess the absolute truth.
Wow.
They believe their scientific conclusions, their moral judgments, and their worldviews are infallible.
And the societal consequences of this intellectual infection are catastrophic because every single infected individual believes their perspective is the only correct one. Communication entirely breaks down.
Completely. They view anyone who disagrees with them not simply as mistaken, but as deeply foolish or actively evil.
Sound familiar?
Sadly, yes. The plague of absolute certainty doesn't create a utopia of enlightened thinkers. It violently fractures society. Men kill each other in senseless rage. Armies march against one another, only to turn their weapons on their own ranks before even reaching the battlefield.
Total, unyielding conviction leads directly to mutual destruction.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the parallels to our current reality are staggering.
They really are. We look at the architecture of modern social media echo chambers, algorithms designed to aggressively feed us only the information that confirms our pre-existing biases.
It's the plague.
It is. We look at the extreme ideological polarization in our politics, the absolute unforgiving certainty people display online where nuance is treated as treason. Dostoevsky essentially dreamt the 21st century.
He really did. We are living inside that plague of ideas right now, where everyone is infected with the belief that they are the extraordinary man armed with the ultimate truth.
And everyone else is just an obstacle to be canceled or destroyed.
Exactly. He foresaw the fatal flaw in relying entirely on cold rationality and utilitarian calculation to govern human affairs. When we attempt to build a society, or even just a personal philosophy, purely on logic and self-interest, we sever the essential empathetic connections that bind us together.
Whether we are trying to mathematically beat a roulette wheel or justify a murder for the supposed greater good.
Right. Dostoevsky's ultimate thesis is that salvation for Raskolnikov and for humanity at large cannot be found in a perfect theory. It is only found by acknowledging our inherent vulnerability, abandoning the supreme arrogance of absolute certainty, and willingly rejoining the human family through compassion.
We have traveled a massive distance today. We started in the frantic, sweaty desperation of the European casinos where people try to cheat the laws of fate with gold coins.
And we moved to the claustrophobic, blood-stained rooms of St. Petersburg, where a brilliant mind tries to cheat the laws of morality with an axe.
The unifying reality in both these masterpieces is that whether you are wagering your last florin on the green felt or betting the moral weight of your soul on a philosophical theory, trying to find a loophole in the universe always exacts a devastating toll.
You cannot outsmart the house, and you cannot outsmart your own fundamental humanity. The moral bill always comes due.
Always. Alexei and Raskolnikov both attempted to elevate themselves above the constraints of the human condition, and both discovered that the intellect alone is insufficient to sustain a life.
It's a powerful lesson.
Which brings us to a final thought I want to leave you with. We've laid out Dostoevsky's warning about the plague of absolute certainty. Look closely at your own life, your interactions this past week. Think about the last time you were scrolling through your feed or fiercely debating a colleague.
Just really reflect on it.
When was the last time you felt absolutely, completely certain that your worldview was the only correct one? Could that very feeling of unquestionable rightness, that deep, comforting conviction that you possess the truth and the other side is entirely foolish, be the exact virus Dostoevsky warned us about over a century and a half ago, who is saving the world from its own absolute truths? Keep questioning, keep exploring the gray areas, and we'll see you on the next Deep Dive.